Hi, I'm Mort Cooper, your host on Change Your Voice, Change Your Life. In studio with me is my co-host, Dr. John Curtis, and he has, together with me, one of those days, come up with the title, Why Voices Failed. I wanted to add the word, why our voices fail, but he said, you don't have to say our, it's implied, and he likes to parse it down, so it's limited to 3 words for a title, Why Voices Fail. Are you a parser?
I believe in, Occam's razor, William of Occam. I mean, very important figure in the history of science, because he really was one who really said, look, if you can give a simple explanation, give it simple. Don't elaborate unnecessarily on things, because it oftentimes a simple explanation. Actually, when you think about the work that you've done over your lifetime in terms of creating direct voice rehabilitation, it's often said that it's way too simplistic. Now, why do people want more esoteric, and they want high tech, and they want all these bells and whistles?
They want complications.
Complications. Why not?
They love complications.
Yeah. And the medical profession today is trying to complicate the issue of voice. This is why voices fail. Well, they say that it's a neurological issue.
Or gene-related. Or it is
virus.
Or a virus, or a disease.
Yeah.
Or it's molecular biological cause, or it's chemical imbalance in the brain, or it's psychiatric. They don't look to the simple answer, which our friend William of Occam's razor, and you know why they called it Occam's razor. He cut to the core. And he also said, do not extend entities unnecessary, which means in basic, simple terms. Don't complicate it, folks. Get to the essence of it, and that's it. But
why do we live in such a complicated world, especially in the area of voice treatment, when it really boils down to some very basic variables, and yet the medical community, when they treat voices, it seems like they're really obfuscating. They're really obfuscating the treatment.
I like that term, obfuscating.
Yeah.
If I didn't know better, I would think it means confusing us and clouding the issue.
Exactly. That's exactly what it means, and what it means is that we're taking something simple and we're obscuring it by creating, we're dancing around the subject, as it were, and treating the areas that are really not addressing the key factors.
Well, the question that comes down to, and we'll get very specific, as to why medicine does not get to the core of why our voices fail. Now, I used our voices again. See, I like that. Why our voices fail. Whose voices are failing? The title is Why Voices Fail, so it's a general rather than a specific. Why do our voices fail? And the answer comes down to simplicity itself. You believe that when you talk, you open your mouth, that's your real, natural, God-given voice. And unfortunately, that's not true, because at puberty, the voice changes markedly between the age of 12 and 15. For the boy and the girl, it becomes the man from the kid. The voice deepens. A huge number of people begin to talk in the lower throat. That's the kiss of death, the lower throat. I feel it's a situation. Henry Kissinger does that.
But he doesn't push it.
No, he doesn't push it, the saving
But,
grace.
I mean, if he did push, you believe that he would blow his voice out if he tried to use excessive volume?
You can't talk from the lower throat. That's the one place nature says you can. And about 50% of the population talks nasally, talk like this. On the East Coast, how are you? You feeling fine? Yeah. They're never going to have pathology. They're never going to lose their voice with that sound. It's ear pollution. I know about it because I used to talk like that too. Hi, how are you? It's a New Yorkese thing. Most of us don't use our real voice because of puberty. It's a dirty trick played on us by nature, unknowingly so. Now, the answer to it is, and the metaphor is, or the analogy is, would you believe that you can get into a car never having had any experience with driving a car? You didn't see your father, your mother, or anybody else as a role model, and just drive the car without knowing how to drive the car? I doubt it. You need some lessons when you begin to drive the car. Some of us take more lessons than others, but basically we need some direction. What happens with puberty between the age of 12 to 15, the vocal folds enlarge markedly. The male has a vocal cord or vocal fold area of about 4/5 of an inch. The female 2/5 or 3/5 of an inch. It's very small, but it takes control away from them, and so they talk in voices that they're not accustomed to. They had a kid voice, now they have an adult voice. They don't know how to use it. Now, why do we say that voices around us that fail, and there are countless voices that fail, are due to viruses and genes and basal ganglia problems and molecular biological problems and psychiatric problems, when the person who has that failing voice never basically had a single lesson on how to use the voice. We educate the mind, we educate ourselves to write, to read, to think, but never one time, ask yourself, have you ever had a single lesson on how to use your real natural voice? And you don't answer that directly because you say you just open your mouth and talk. The problem, John, is that you talk like that, and as you go along, people say, they avoid you, they turn you off, or they look at their watch. I got to be going when you talk that way. So you begin to talk down here. And time and again I hear people say that. That's why they talk all the way down here.
Do most people like their voice?
No. 99% plus.
When they hear it played back on a tape
like
recorder, what do they hear?
At a moment of truth. They cannot believe that is their voice.
So it's unappealing, but what is it that do you think they find unappealing about it? Is it too nasal? Is it too thin? Is it too...
They don't recognize the voice because they're hearing themselves. Stromster at the University of Michigan many years ago came up with the answer to why we are shocked at hearing our voices. It's a very simple explanation. We hear ourselves through the bones of our head 3/1000ths of a second faster than we do from our mouth to our ear. Now, other people outside of us can hear us as we are. So when you play the tape machine back of your recorded voice, you hear yourself through air conduction as we hear you. But you hear yourself when you're talking through bone conduction, which makes the sound rich and full. And then you hear yourself playing back like this, or you're talking like that, and you can't believe that's your voice. I did a study some years ago just to show how inept we are in identifying our voices. I was teaching for UCLA, the Extension Division, and I recorded 10 people. And I had 10 people count to 10. Very simple, just count to 10. And I didn't do anything. And then I had another tape machine, and I rearranged the voices so they couldn't identify which sequence they were in. Nobody could identify whose voice it was. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because they know who they are, they think, but they couldn't identify their own voice when counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're talking like this: 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Rearrange the voices that were recorded in sequence, and they can't tell.
I thought a voice is a signature for somebody. It's something that is their stamp of identity.
It is.
Then why couldn't they recognize their own voice?
As I mentioned a moment ago, they hear themselves through the bones of their head 3/1000ths of a second faster.
So when they hear it through air conduction, it sounds differently.
Yeah, they can't identify it. Stromster pointed that out over 50 years ago, which is fascinating, explaining why we can't identify our voices and we don't understand who we are in voice. So if you talk like this, you think you're sounding very impressive and very, very listenable, and people are going to listen. They look at their watch and they say they have to go. They have to go. The voice can bore people, turn them off, but it can create ill health.
But the medics aren't really focused on voice per se. They're more focused on the underlying physiology of the voice, or the neuroanatomy. Why is it that they believe that they can treat voice, which is a dynamic entity that involves functional elements? How is it that they've concluded that they can treat it only the neurology or the physiology of the voice, and that's going to be sufficient to reconstruct a voice?
They're not trained in practical voice use. They are trained in physiological, anatomical voice.
But is there a
So
correlation?
they know the structure of the larynx, they know the structure of the throat,
Okay,
called the pharynx.
is there a connection between the pharynx per se and the application of functional voice?
No.
In other words, if they can inject the pharynx, or if they can treat the pharynx, and they have for years, you've mentioned that they used to use paraffin wax.
That's into the vocal cords in 1913.
Okay.
That was Bruning. Yeah.
Okay. But now I understand.
It failed.
That may have failed. But isn't it true, I did read a report, and I believe I heard an interview, of a gentleman who is now injecting, as a matter of fact, I think he's based here in Los Angeles. He's injecting the pharynx now, the vocal cords, with collagen. And he says he can take a voice that is old and tired. Maybe he's from New York.
No,
I
it's
think
Philadelphia.
Is this
Robert Sadeloff.
Oh, is this Robert? That's right, Robert Sadeloff. Yeah, I'm
Right.
glad you mentioned that.
Right.
Now, what Sadeloff said, and which I find utterly fascinating, and I think the rest of the audience will find this fascinating too, because you know that voices change over time. And in many instances, you've got these people who age with their voices, which means on a telephone, for instance, if you're doing telemarketing or you're working, you can actually pick up with individuals their aging almost to the day, if you're sensitive to it, by their voice. Now, Sadeloff says that he has developed a fountain of youth with respect to voices. He can take an old, tired, and deteriorated sounding voice and he can inject it with collagen. He thinks collagen is really what restores the natural, youthful voice. Is that true?
No, no. They're using implants. This is a whole new era of medicalizing our voices. Our voices are basically functional in nature, which means that you use them. The vocal folds are down in the lower throat, in the laryngeal area.
It's the pharynx, right?
Well, that's the pharynx. The pharynx extends from, it goes from the seventh cervical vertebrae up to the eyebrows, and it's a megaphone basis, 6 to 9 inches in long, the narrow portion down here. It's broken up into the lower throat, called the lower pharynx, the middle pharynx around the mouth, and the upper pharynx around the nose. So it's called the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Big terms, but it means the throat, and it's broken up into the lower throat, the middle throat, and the upper throat, and it's 6 to 9 inches in length. Now, what Sadeloff, and he's a fine ear, nose, and throat doctor, extremely well known. He has the view, with his other colleagues in the field, to give a voice lift for people who don't sound right, they don't sound young, who want to sound brighter and fuller and so forth.
That's it. He said he was doing a voice lift,
Yes.
like a facelift.
Yes.
Now, I believe he's the first one to coin the term voice lift, is he not? He just came out with this.
No, I think there's another gentleman by the name of Peek Wu who's in New York. He's well known. And Stephen Zeidel, who's at the Cleveland Clinic, who for 15 years has been of the view that you should put something into the vocal folds rather than just take something out. He's a surgeon, a nose and throat surgeon. He himself, incidentally, has said in an interview recently in the Boston Globe that his voice is wearing down because he's been talking a lot. His voice is wearing down because he's misusing his voice. The voice doesn't wear out. It wears out because you're misusing it and you're putting the pressure in the lower throat. But aside from that...
Is that sort of like a tire wearing out?
Yeah.
In other words, if it isn't balanced or aligned the proper way, then you can cause a flat tire, you can cause a wear and tear on a part of it?
Yes, let's put it on another level, which we all understand.
So it's not really aging per se that wears the voice out. It really has more to do with the proper alignment.
That's correct. Let's put it on another level, the leg cramp. We do know, everybody does know, that a leg cramp is not a genetic problem. It's not a structural problem per se.